Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's show, I'll be reviewing the film Werewolves. I wasn't planning on doing this movie by itself, but I have so much to say about it that it's getting its own time slot. So here we go. Alright, Werewolves. Where do I start? Well, the title doesn't lie. There are werewolves in this movie. And on a side note, when I went to see this movie in the theater, there was a guy a few seats down from me who brought an entire gallon of Arnold Palmer, the iced tea. Good drink, by the way. I don't know how on earth the guy snuck in with that thing, but God bless him. Okay, but in all seriousness, Werewolves is a movie I was actually pretty curious about. I do enjoy a good monster movie, and Werewolves, not the movie The Monsters, usually have some pretty cool stories, I have to say. Like, An American Werewolf in London is an especially good and disturbing film. It's a really awesome horror movie, one of my favorites for sure. And, despite maybe having aged a little bit with the practical effects, I mean, some people will probably say it's timeless. I think it looks a little dated now. It's just a timeless story that is really, really well told. But for this movie, Werewolves, it takes a more campy, crazy, and insane twist on the lore of werewolves. If you're familiar with, like, the whole lore, it's like person gets bit or scratched by, a werewolf, and then they turn into a werewolf. This movie's very different from that, and probably what got me the most interested in the film is the premise itself. It's basically about this supermoon that activates this werewolf gene, and basically everyone on Earth, so billions of people, turn into werewolves when this supermoon comes out. And this isn't a spoiler, by the way. It's all shown in the first couple minutes of the movie. But there was this one supermoon event that takes place before this movie, and now it's happening again, so people are a little more prepared, and they're kind of like getting ready for everything, and, they're told to stay indoors. And that was pretty interesting to me. I'd never really heard of a story like that before, especially in this kind of movie. And hey, I like werewolves. I think they're cool, so this seemed like an interesting idea. And one of the people in this movie is played by Frank Grillo. He's like the protagonist of the film, and he's a good choice to play your badass lead. He just has like that sort of Vin Diesel, Sylvester Stallone-esque like grittiness and like meanness to him, where you're just like, yeah, he can take anyone who comes at him. He can punch anyone and, they'd go right through a brick wall. Like, it's one of those people. He's a good actor. He's definitely been in a bunch of stuff before. You'll see him again soon. He's going to be playing a pretty big role in James Gunn's DC movies as Rick Flag's father. And I'm pretty excited to see where he goes with that. But essentially, though, these things all got me curious because it's a nice twist on the werewolf movie, and we haven't seen anything like it before, and I like Frank Grillo, and I was excited for that. And look, really, I knew this wasn't going to be a great film going, and I knew it from the beginning. I just wanted to have some fun and hopefully laugh at how crazy things get. Because as many people have already pointed out, this movie is essentially just werewolves meets The Purge. The Purge is a movie where, like, crime is legal for 24 hours, and everyone's just on the street doing crime, and everyone's like, you have some people who are trying to be good, and they're on the run. This is very much a mix of those two things, and that sounds good enough to me. I like The Purge well enough. Look, they're not good movies, but some of them have potential. And werewolves are cool, so we could have seen where that went. But apparently I was wrong, because this movie is actually quite bad. I really hate to say that, because I really do think they were trying here, but it's not a movie that worked for me. Maybe it'll work for some other people. It just wasn't what I was hoping for out of it. It starts off acting like it's the coolest, most awesome thing ever, and that made me smile, actually. That's what I wanted. I just wanted a movie that was so, like, it's acting like it's the most cool, absurd thing. It's like werewolf just flashes on the title screen, like in the most dramatic form. It looks, so goofy, but it's like, that's what I want. I want just a good B movie. I just want something so campy and ridiculous, acts like it's Sharknado or something. I want that. And that's what I was hoping for out of this movie. But what follows, like, this big opening isn't even the B movie it was getting me primed up for. It's like a C or D movie that makes a lot of frustrating choices and unfortunately has very little that actually won me over by the end. Basically, you spend the first 20 minutes of the movie or so getting through all this bad exposition and setup, and that's all expected. That's kind of what I figured going in. It's going to be like The Purge, where you just have, like, this beginning that's really, not that interesting. It's just kind of like, all right, get to the purge already, get to the big stuff. This movie's like, all right, come on, get to the full moon, get to the werewolves. In my mind, though, I'm like, it's the slow wait for all the cool stuff, right? No, afterwards it promises that things are gonna get pretty gnarly, only for things to be pretty tame, in my opinion. I didn't really think it ever got to a point where I was like, wow, from anything. Not even like, wow, this is scary. Not, wow, this is like amazing. Wow, this is crazy. Nothing. It was just like a very, like my heart rate. I mean, I'm sure like it was all very low. Like it wasn't really elevating any emotion in me. It wasn't like eliciting any emotion, and that's again unfortunate because I think the people involved wanted to make a cool low budget indie film. But that's the main issue. This movie is still at the end of the day an indie film. It's expensive to have one werewolf that looks convincing. Believe me, I totally get it. Movies cost a lot of money. And talk about several werewolves? I mean, that's gotta cost a fortune. But this movie doesn't have a fortune to spend. It has a very minuscule budget. I don't even know how much, but I'm gonna assume in like the low millions, if even that. And look, I can give this movie credit that they used a practical werewolf suit instead of opting for cheap CGI like I totally know like a sci-fi original movie would have. But that's kind of another problem here. I was constantly distracted by how clear it was that the werewolves were just people wearing suits that belong in a haunted house attraction, in my opinion. Like, they look like the kind of people just dressed up. You go to, like, a haunted house for Halloween, and they have, like, the guy in the werewolf suit jump out and spook you. That's what this looked like to me. It didn't really feel like, high-value werewolf. And look, I totally get it. It's a low-budget movie. They don't have a lot of money to spend on big werewolf, makeup and practical effects. But I just feel like, at least if you're gonna do it, like, you gotta do it right. And I think, like, the way these suits look for this movie, it would be awesome for a haunted house, not so much for a feature film. Maybe it could work in, like, like a fan film, like a short film, maybe, but I just think, like, in a theatrical released movie, I think you need a little more, even in a B movie. And my main issue with the movie, though, is that it's very clearly restrained by its own budget, or lack thereof. Because look, beyond just, the werewolf, prosthetics, beyond kind of like the way the movie looks and everything, it just often cuts away from big action set pieces that are about to take place. Like, it just constantly, like you see something really cool about to happen, it just cuts away, and you're like, why'd you cut away? Probably because they couldn't really afford to show much more of it. A lot of the movie happens in very low lighting. The action happens in very low lighting, so it's hard to see. And additionally, the locations feel pretty empty, which I just don't think totally fits. Like, I get it, it's like, this is the second time this kind of supermoon's happening, so you can't, you don't have that many extras because a lot of people are just kind of hiding indoors, assumingly. The problem, though, is you're still giving this movie where, like, it's a horror movie, kind of. It's an action horror movie. You have werewolves just on the street, and even then you only see, like, 6 maybe at a time, max, and it's like, this is supposed to be a world where, like, literally everyone on Earth could turn into a werewolf. Like, it's very limited, it's very restricted, the street shouldn't feel this empty, and additionally, a lot of the cinematography feels very rushed, almost like it's using as much basic coverage as possible. Like, in a lot of big budget, studio films, you'll really feel like the cinematography got, like, a lot of attention put into it. Like, every shot is very well composed. It has, like, a real, like, nice symmetry to it. This movie, like, the shots here, they just feel very, like, all right, we gotta go, like, shoot something. And it's just, like, everything looks just very rushed, and, like, they just, because every movie has to get basic coverage, like, in case a shot doesn't look good, or it's blurry or something, like, you need to have coverage, and that's what it feels like. It feels like they just took the most generic, basic camera angles they could get just to get the movie done. As a result, the editing feels kind of choppy, because you'll get, like, these random close-ups to stuff. I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. I really wouldn't be surprised if this movie was filmed in only a couple of weeks, if even that, like, maybe even a week. Because that's just how, like, snappy things feel. It just feels like they're really pushing to get this done as quick as possible. Not because they wanted to. I don't think, like, Again, it's not me saying like the filmmakers just wanted to rush this and get it out the door. I'm saying like this is a money problem where they didn't have enough money or enough resources to really like keep going for longer, especially when you have actors. I mean, they're expensive. You gotta like really like, account for all that. The movie does try to come up with some interesting scenarios, a few of which are actually pretty decent, kind of like to give some more tension here. One is that like a woman having to decide if she should try to save her friend or risk her safety and the safety of her loved ones just to kind of like save her life. That was an interesting scene. It's one of those like, I hope you don't make the dumb decision moments, but I thought they at least like kind of had a logical reason for that happening, so it made sense. But generally speaking, I was never on the edge of my seat or grinning from ear to ear from what I was watching. Really, the tension is lost a lot of the time because, as I said, like, they just cut constantly when things are getting interesting. And just, like, every time you really, like, feel the tension swell, it just, they cut the break. It's over. And I think a lot of this could be forgiven if the characters were more interesting, but I don't think I really cared about anyone in the movie. There are a few nice ideas about the protagonist and his family who lost someone close to them, but that's literally the driving motive for, like, 3 characters in the movie, so when you don't have anything besides that, you start to feel like, alright, something's, like, missing here, and you're just kind of waiting for something else to grasp onto. At least that's how I felt. And besides Frank Grillo's character, we also spend a decent amount of time with a woman by his side, as well as his sister-in-law and her daughter in a separate place from him and the other woman. I think there was a decent amount of potential with the sister-in-law thing because of their bond and kind of their connection to each other, but they barely interact throughout the movie besides a few times, so you really didn't feel like their connection was that strong, and I think, like, really focusing on that, like, making Frank Grillo's character, like, the big protagonist, having his sister-in-law character and her daughter be, like, the big secondary protagonist. And maybe maybe the filmmakers think that was the case. I didn't feel that way because we just didn't really have anything for the sister-in-law to do. She was just kind of walking around the house, with a shotgun, waiting for something to happen. And you're just like, all right, come on. Like, I want to just see Frank Grillo kind of like come back here, have a big showdown happen. Like, you're just waiting for that. And my last big complaint here is that the movie makes some really strange and quite frankly baffling choices. This is mainly due to the script, which I have a lot of issues with, but especially in the third act, there's one choice made that I can't wrap my head around. I really, really can't. A character does something to prevent others from being in danger, but at the same time, in making this decision also puts them in maybe even worse danger. Like, I really don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what the characters were thinking. They were like, nothing was built up enough to really be like, okay, I can see why you're thinking of doing this. Like, it's just kind of like a very last minute change. And I think a lot of this was done with the purpose of just giving a really awesome finale. And I think the cost of that outweighed the benefits. For one, I don't think the finale was all that epic as it was kind of promising to be. Second of all, it just made me very frustrated because I was like, it just makes the characters less likable and a little more frustrating to deal with. Like, any kind of, like, reasoning I had, like, oh, this guy's a smart guy. Now I'm like, you're an idiot. So, I don't know. That was a really frustrating choice. And there were a few choices like that throughout the movie that I just couldn't justify at all. Like, and it wasn't just like this one character making a bad choice. It was several people making bad decisions or thinking about making bad decisions. And it's like the typical, like, I thought we were past like this type of horror. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm getting a little too pissed off at this movie for something that, is a B movie. It's not really trying to be too serious. Just the way I viewed it, it felt like it was taking itself too seriously. Like, I thought I was going to have a very fun time watching it. No one in my theater was really, like, laughing or smiling, really, that I noticed. That's just my experience. Maybe others will feel differently. But I was just kind of hoping for more out of it. I could ramble on about this movie for, like, an hour, but I'll end it here. I don't want to go too hard on this movie. I know people really did work on it. And despite all my criticisms, it's still a well-intentioned movie, and I try to remember that a group of people really did try their best to make this good. it just wasn't for me. It was a big, big letdown. If this movie makes a good amount of money and they can make a sequel or prequel with a bigger budget behind it, I'd be willing to take another chance on it. Because I really think a prequel in particular with like the supermoon, the first supermoon that was kind of talked about very briefly in this movie, that sounds awesome. That sounds like a really fun idea and is probably what I would have initially, ideally wanted from this movie from its inception. Like, watching the movie, you can kind of see the potential in what this could have been. And if they make that movie, I will be there. I didn't like this movie at all, really, but I will be there if they make a prequel because I think that has potential if they can get more money. Because, I mean, if a prequel is going to be the same as this movie, like, same quality, I don't really have much faith in it. But if they can get more resources, more money, I will check it out for sure. And look, I wanted to support this movie because it's good to tell Hollywood that we want more small B movies. It's important to tell Hollywood that we want more creative films and not just IP and franchises. Look, I love my franchises. I love, Inside Out 2, and I love, Toy Story, and let's see, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Marvel, DC, all that stuff. I love it all, but I want, these other small filmmakers to get their shot too. I want more small movies because I love movies. I want to make movies like that. I just wish I liked this one more so I could recommend it. But it is what it is. So, I'm going to give this movie a D. I really didn't like it, but I hope people out there did. I hope there's people who, I'm sure it has its audience, people who just want to have, this certain type of movie. Like, I will say this movie caters to a very specific type of audience. If you know, like, exactly what kind of movie this is and you want that kind of movie, you probably will have a good time, but for anyone else, I can't recommend giving it a watch. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear and improve this show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.